966.
All right, you can participate in this because it's a common theme. As everyone knows, if you read media or anything, that Kylian Mbappe was offered a by Hilal, Saudi uh, team, Al Hilal, a what was reported to be a $1.2 billion offer. It was not. What it was Kylian Mbappe is at odds with his Paris Saint Germain, and may or may not play. But anyway, but he says he's not going to play for next year. But so the Saudis, spied an opportunity here, offered Paris PSG a $332 million transfer fee, which is insane, but is out there, and a proposed salary of $221 million for Mbappe. It looks like he's going to decline this. It was a situation where, again, the Saudis were looking. This was an opportunity to maybe have, even for only 1 year, maybe the best soccer player in the world, football player in the world. It doesn't look like it's come to materialize, but of course, it's sparked all sorts of commentary and even the NBA players were offering to come over and come to Saudi for that kind of money. So anyway, it's sort of part and parcel with this whole wild transfer season in which Saudi Arabia has been very heavily involved. The purpose of this one big thing is to try and add to the picture of what Saudi Arabia is trying to do. Because if you think they're just trying to buy every available football player, but they're really looking at it more organically. And I'm just going to go through the last 3 months of events that maybe you didn't know about, but are interesting in the context of what Saudi Arabia is trying to do with regard to its whole football ecosystem. So in May, the Saudi Arabian Football Federation and the Confederation of African Football signed a landmark 5-year MOU to foster growth opportunities for African and Saudi football. So the MOU focused on initiatives around technical and football development, grassroots football, women's football, talent identification, competitions, friendly matches, and commercial opportunities. Also, there are ongoing discussions that Saudi Arabia is having with the Confederation of African Football over a $200 million deal to sponsor a new African Super League. That's not confirmed yet, but that's in discussion. So why is this meaningful? So 60% of Africa's 1.25 billion people are under the age of 25. It's the youngest population in the world. A lot of they love football in many of these countries. It's a tremendous source of talent, and this connection with Saudi Arabia has a couple things going forward. One, there's politics involved. Saudi wants to host the 2034 FIFA World Cup. It's also angling for the 2030 Expo. Lots of votes to be had in Africa, so it's good politics. But it's also organic. I mean, if you're trying to build a home league and bring in a lot of young talent, connecting with development of football in a continent of 1.25 billion people, the youngest demographic on Earth, is a good idea. That was May. In June, which we've talked about here on the 966, the Public Investment Fund agrees to acquire 75% of four major clubs. Essentially the Saudi Professional League clubs, now that Al Ahly is back in. So the four major clubs are Al Ahly, Al Hilal, Al Ittihad, and Al Nasser. Same time, certainly at the inducement of the government, Aramco buys a stake in Al Qadsiya, which is, a Neom buys a stake in Al Sukur, Diriyah Gate, a stake in Al Diriyah Club, Al Ula Government Royal Commission for Al Ula invested in Al Ula Club. So the purpose of this, that's the top line thing. PIF invests in four clubs, but announced at the same time was the sports clubs investment and privatization project, and we've talked a little bit about that here. But what that is a formalized initiative for sports clubs in general, but specifically for the Saudi Professional League, and the intent to make it one of the top 10 leagues in the world in terms of football. So this project sports clubs investment and privatization project sort of has two parts. One, the first part gets approval of investments by corporations and public sector organizations and sports clubs, just like PIF and Aramco and NEOM just did. And the second involves essentially privatizing sports clubs starting from the final quarter of 2023. So they're looking to take these sports clubs and essentially monetize them, but also in the course of doing that, establish best practices, have them better run, increase their value. So that the ultimate goal is to increase the revenue of the SPL, Saudi Professional League, from 120 million today to more than 480 million dollars annually. Raise the market value of the SPL from 800 million today to 2.1 billion. And Lucian, you and I are intimately familiar with the value of franchises today, since our Washington football team just sold largest franchise price in the history of the NFL, just over $6 billion.
So awesome, Richard.
It is awesome.
Excited about
it.
Yeah.
And the Cretinous guy who bought it in 1999 paid $800 million. So it's a good investment.
And Richard, we've mentioned this on the show, and then sorry to just jump in here, but he ran it into the ground. He literally destroyed the franchise. It was couldn't get seats or couldn't get tickets to the game. Now they are shuttering parts of the stadium. We don't need to go on about it, but he ran it into the ground and still, 600% up his money. So anyway, yes, absolutely. You're right. Agreed. Yeah.
So let's just, before I get to July, just to rehash, you've got the top line thing. Saudi Arabia is buying every football player, but then in May, they have a tie-up. They have a very interesting and promising tie-up with the Confederation of African Football. Really a tremendous hotbed for potential talent. In June, they invest and have corporations invest in key teams with the intent of professionalizing everything and moving everything towards a privatization of hopefully most of the teams. All right, here's the other thing. So that's two aspects of building an ecosystem. Just in July, they just announced in July that the alignment between the Saudi Pro League, which is part of the Saudi Arabian Football Federation, essentially they've changed all their regulations for who can play on an SPL team. So and there has been some, people have said, well, if they're getting all these people, what about Saudis? So this new regulation is going to reduce the age of eligibility to be on an SPL team from 18 years to 16-year-olds. That's immediate for the 23-24 season. The next step is that currently of the 35 players on a team, they're going to require that 10 of them be under the age of 21 for the 25-26 season. So, first the age goes down for the next year of eligibility. The following year, you're going to require that 10 of your team be under 21. So they're trying to really, have a youth movement. And there's a number of other things, but, this is all part of a long-term. So essentially, and then by the 26-27 season, so this is 3 years out, there'll be a mandate on clubs in the league to include 8 homegrown players that are graduates of the club academies within their main roster of 25 squad players. So are you with me on that? Was that clear?
Yeah, that was clear, and that makes sense. Yeah, that's
so first
cool.
They're going to say, next year they got to, more eligible. The following year, you got to have 10 kids under 21. And the year after that, 8 of your core 25 have to be homegrown players. Again, trying to grow the ecosystem. They just named a guy, Michael Emanello, who was just named as a new director of football. So it's all becoming very formalized. They're really setting out some protocols and requirements. Interesting factoids as part of this, looking into this. Since 2021, funding in Saudi youth football has increased by 162%, and 23 regional training centers have been established and open. The number of registered male players has increased by 58%, and the number of coaches has risen from 750 in 2018 to over 5,500 in 2023. of which over 1,000 are female coaches. A new women's Premier League has also been launched. We've talked about that. It commits new funds to support this Premier League for women and a women's first division league, which is 30 clubs. So right now, over 80% of the kingdom's population is either playing, attending, or following football. So the purpose of this was just crazy on this Kylian Mbappe offer. The responses and the attention it got, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen. He's not. It doesn't look like he's going to come. But it's important to look at what else is being done to actually to support and create a foundation for a thriving, sustainable, football ecosystem in Saudi Arabia. They're really going at this in a serious sort of holistic, organic way, and it'll be interesting to see how it evolves.
I love this, Richard, because you've done such a good job at really highlighting how the investment is not just in the headline gathering player acquisitions, which if you're only focusing on that, make it seem like they're just trying to buy their way into some sort of to generate the league into being more legitimate, or sort of an increase in that league's ranking versus other leagues just by having the best players. In fact, what they're doing, like you've said, I think brilliantly, is investing in the development of the ecosystem so that you have homegrown players in a matter of time. You have you have these rules built in so that you can basically create these clubs that are not just foreign players, but are a mix, a blend of both. And doing that is actually very good for the country. It's a good business. It's good for the country's health and wellness goals that are part of Vision 2030. And it makes the league watchable. I mean, you're when you have a hometown team, it's always cool, Richard, here in Washington, D.C., when you have Ryan Zimmerman, who is kind of from the area, played at my alma mater, UVA, Virginia, and then played for the Nationals. It makes him a little bit more of a hometown hero.
Absolutely.
And so you're going to get that in the Saudi Pro League. The acquisition of these big names and these transfers is sort of like putting fuel. It's like, lighter fluid on a fire. It makes it burn brighter and faster and quicker, but long term, it's going to flare out if you don't support it with more wood and other kindling to keep it going and have it build for, to be sustainable. So I just think that was really interesting. I didn't know that about these forthcoming rules about making sure that you are developing the farm system for these teams. And that's super cool. And that means that these changes, these investments, they seem like big numbers now, but it could be a very good investment in 5 to 10 years when players are jockeying to play in the Saudi Pro League.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Also, as you were speaking, Richard, just wanted to make this point. Saudi Arabia's investments into sports are often lumped together as one thing. Like we're talking about just like, Saudi Arabia's sporting ambitions. And it's a phrase that I've used a lot. But if in your description, Richard, of all the stuff they've done, and again, that was just brilliant. Yeah. It's very different than golf. Like they're trying to make money on golf, and they're trying to get a footprint on golf as a sport that hasn't really reached its international growth potential. But they're not trying to make golf happen locally as much as they are soccer. I mean, if you go to the driving range at the Saudi Golf Club right outside of Riyadh, it's packed. People are excited about golf because they're hearing about golf all the time. But they're not trying to get everybody in the country to start playing golf. And it's not part of a health and wellness thing in the same way that football is for Saudi Arabia. This is part of a society building exercise for the kingdom, what they're doing in sports. So I just think it's good to make that distinction. That was great, Richard. That was awesome. I didn't know a lot of that stuff, by the way. I've just been obsessed with the headlines and all the big names and stuff. So anyway, that's really interesting.
Those are excellent points. And I think that's a good distinction between golf and football. Also, that lighter fluid imagery was poetic, really nicely done.
That just came to me in the moment, and I was like, "Wow, this is not bad." Usually, when I come up with an analogy, I'm like, "Well, that's not exactly right." Thank you. Yeah.
And by the way, we have a 966 quiz for you. So, of the players, nationalities of the players in this SPL, Saudi Professional League, obviously Saudi is far and away the largest number. So there's 371 Saudis in the league. What is the next nationality? And then we'll do that. If you get anywhere close to the next nationality and number, actually, we're gonna make we'll since you have absolutely no expertise in any of this, and but we spout it anyway. So, what would be your guess for what nationality is next and how many?
Okay, so I'm gonna go on a limb here, and I might not even be on the right side of the earth, but I would guess Argentina.
You know, you have a real instinct for this. It's not Argentina.
Damn.
But it is South America.
Ooh. Okay.
Your instinct was excellent, and it's Brazil.
Brazil. I actually thought about that anyway. So damn.
Brazil,
next time.
Brazil at 28. So obviously the league is very heavily Saudi. So 371 Saudi. The next greatest number is Brazil at 28. And then here we go to Africa. Morocco 9, Algeria 8, Spain 8, Colombia 7, Argentina, your Argentina 6, Cameroon 5, Portugal 5, and then we go down into 4 3s, 2s, and 1s. So the second largest contingent is Brazilian at 28, which I think is interesting. I'm kudos to you. I probably would not have guessed that. I would have guessed an African country.
African country would have been, I think, a better guess, just because of the proximity. The reason why I said Argentina is because when Qatar hosted the World Cup and Saudi Arabia played Argentina, there were there's like a huge Argentinian expat community in Saudi Arabia that I was kind of unaware of. But the SPA did this like kind of video. We used some of their B-roll for some of our segments. And I remember watching it being like, there's a lot of Argentina jerseys here at this game, or like in Saudi Arabia getting ready to fly over to Qatar for that game and ultimately be very disappointed in the result as the Green Falcons surprised them. So
yes,
Richard, that was awesome. I didn't know a lot of that stuff. I love when we do these segments because especially our one big things, because we sort of set them aside as like, this may not be the number one issue of the week, but we're just going to spend some time kind of going a little bit deeper into it than we may think we would. We try to mix them up every now and then, but look, soccer, and I did it again, Richard, this week, is just the number one story on Saudi Arabia across the world, and it's not even close. And if you go to Google News, search for the word Saudi, use the news filter, and then make the timeline past week, you can't find anything else about Saudi Arabia. The first story that comes up in the first 30 stories about Saudi Arabia that is not related to soccer was related to Erdogan's visit last week from Turkey. And I was like, so you have to filter if you're searching for Saudi, and we do this for our newsletter every day. We use different algorithms to feed information, then we kind of sort it. You have to subtract the word football or soccer to find stuff that is not football or soccer related.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of compliments, Richard, on this podcast that we draw attention to issues that are not just the main issue. But part of this is, I'm just winding this compliment up. It's really good to get into this and say, look, this is actually a really significant and complex and there's a strong strategy behind what they're doing here. And to really get to it like that was really good, Richard. Awesome job.
By the way, thank you very much. And these are always fun. And you're right. We just pick them because we think they deserve some attention, and we try and learn a little bit more about them. Did you watch any of the? You probably didn't. You have guests and you have kids. Any of the U.S. women's and Netherlands game last night?
I haven't. I really like watching women's soccer, Richard, but I have not watched.
No, it's TV. Okay. But it was.
What happened? Like, tell me about it.
Well, they came out a little flat, but it was. These women were going at it. This was a chippy, physical, in-your-face game. It was, and Netherlands is good. So it was a good game. It was a 1-1 draw, but I'm guessing both teams will pass through, get out of the group phase, but who knows? But anyway, it was a highly contested, chippy game. It was pretty. It's fun, And I've got a daughter who plays, lots of sports, and she, bless her heart and pride of my soul, is competitive, never backs down, and it was fun to see these women just go at it.
Sounds like you've raised her right, and I know for a fact that
Yes.
you have raised her right. So that is awesome. Yes, I've been meaning to turn it on. Where is it being played?
This is New Zealand and Australia. So,
Oh, okay.
it was late last night.
Okay, cool. Sometimes that means it's really actually at a good time. But
Well, it's funny because they're all sort of a lot of them have long sleeves because it's a little chilly down there right now.
yeah, yeah, yep. Richard, you're right. We had I want to say there were like 100 people here last weekend for my wife's
Oh yes, you're
sister
right.
baby shower, and that was of course the weekend of the Open, the British Open, and I wouldn't dare turn on the British Open on the TV when we had this huge party of mostly women, my wife's friends, and etc. So yeah, there hasn't been a lot of good sporting on TV here.
And just for the record, you were delighted to be supportive and helpful throughout the
Absolutely.
weekend.
Absolutely. It was my honor to do that.